Chapter 24. Over breakfast and tea. Harriel. After the tension of the petition, Harriel craved her bed, but there was another urge she'd left neglected too. Days of flying was exhausting, and it wasn't before her nerves began to settle that her stomach reminded her of how ravenous it was. "We are relieved to have you returned safe and well, Lady Harriel," Queen Alicent said. "You must be worn after your journey, but my daughter's been concerned for you, and she'd be gladdened to see you before you retire." Harriel had never interacted much with the Queen before, but from a distance she'd observed that Alicent Hightower was proud, ladylike, and noteworthy beautiful. Probably the prettiest of all the royals, though plenty would probably argue that. Most in Westeros preferred Valyrian coloring, and Harriel knew stating anything else around places such as Dragonstone would be stupidity itself. Or maybe Alicent's beauty was accentuated because the Queen usually stood next to Viserys, which made the contrast all the more drastic. The same way Viserys almost looked more ill compared to his young wife. Aemond had also inherited his mother's eyes, though not the coloring, yet they would make the exact same furious stare when provoked to great emotion. Harriel might be a little resentful of Alicent's voice too. She was the Queen, and like Princess Rhaenyra, people listened to them with next to no effort, and it was near impossible to not be envious. Harriel had to throw magic around, murmur for the spectators, raise dragons, and be on the verge of disaster to even get 15 minutes of attention that had probably be forgotten after Hagrid and Aemond's arrival. Or it could have, but even Harriel's golden gown was heard better than her own voice. "Go ahead, and I'll arrange for a warm supper to be sent up to Helena's chamber for you," the Queen continued. "I believe you'll be more comfortable using the chamber next to Helena's for your stay than whatever Prince Jacaerys arranged in the visitors' wing. It's winter, and after your journey it's for the better you serve as Helena's bedmate than sleep alone." Harriel was about to mention she'd never shared a bed with Helena before, and the princess wasn't always comfortable with proximity, but her stomach picked that moment to rumble so loudly it echoed in the stone hallway, and she flushed. The Queen smiled knowingly. "Thank you, my Queen. I haven't had a chance to rest or eat since dawn." Harriel realized if they were going to insist on bedmates, the alternative was either some unfamiliar lady at court, or Baela. Harriel had shared a bed with the twins many times before, but after Baela's reaction to Vhagar, that option wasn't as pleasant anymore. Harriel desperately needed a few hours without conflict, and forcing her company on Baela at present sounded like a headache in the making. "Then you must be positively faint with exhaustion, and I won't allow that to stand." The Queen turned to one of the knights. "Make sure Lady Harriel doesn't get lost, Sir Eric. It's been too long since her last visit, and she isn't familiar with the Red Keep yet." Though Harriel remembered the way, it might have been for the better Sir Eric escorted her to Helena's rooms, since she probably wouldn't have been allowed past some of the guards otherwise. "Harriel? You look resplendent." Helena smiled, eyes crinkling in a smile while she remained seated on the bench when Harriel arrived. The red-haired girl with freckles took Harriel's arrival as her cue to leave, and though her looks reminded Harriel of the Weasleys with a jolt of longing, she thought the girl was actually Helena's friend from House Redwyne. "How glad I am to see you safe. I saw you arrive on Norbert, but where have you been? What happened?" She didn't have to wait long before supper was set up in Helena's chamber, and Harriel gave a brief summary of the last couple of weeks while she ate. It was pleasant and easy, but while they discussed Winterfell's glass garden, Harriel was reminded of Cregan, and the question she'd been trying to ignore sprang to the forefront of her mind again. Why hadn't Helena told her? Why hadn't Baela? Or Rhaena? Did they not know? Did they know but assumed Harriel automatically understood too? Did they know but kept quiet anyway? Harriel didn't press the issue, but couldn't quite erase the nagging feeling that Helena knew. Aemond had, so why not Helena? Why did her brother end up telling Harriel this foregone conclusion, and not Helena? Weren't they supposed to be friends? The twins were Daemon's daughters, so maybe they knew too, but Helena was older, and yet she'd failed to let Harriel in on the situation. Then again, it's not as if they lived in the same castle, and Helena was the sort who didn't push even in regards to her own future, often accepting matters as if it was a foregone conclusion. Perhaps that's why Harriel felt more wary of his lapse by the twins. The twins' failure to mention how restrictive her situation was, even in passing over the years, was hard to explain away as incidental. Either they were ignorant too, or they kept silent on their father's orders, and considering Damon's role in this, Ariel couldn't trust it was the former the way she would have just weeks before. It still felt like a betrayal though, and though she didn't bring it up, a part of Ariel resented Helena for not telling her. "It's a bit earlier than I usually go to bed, but you look exhausted, Ariel. Why don't you assist me to get ready and we'll retire?" Helena decided while a maid named Diana carried away the plates. Leaned back in her chair, Ariel nodded through half-lidded eyes, fighting the urge to yawn wide and rudely before getting to her feet. She helped Helena untie her gown and carefully removed the pins out of her hair before rebraiding it in preparation for the next day, mindful to do it with minimal skin contact while not crowding her either. Ariel never knew exactly what caused it, but Helena had some touch aversion and discomforts. It was hard to know what would set it off too, because one moment Helena would seem perfectly fine while having her hair braided. Then next she'd jerk away as if someone simply grazed her shoulder. Once done assisting the princess, Ariel made easy work of her own gown, while Helena used the wash basin to get clean before bed. At first, the bedmaid practices had seemed peculiar to Ariel. Maybe it was because she grew up so isolated with the Dursleys, but even at Hogwarts she'd never been made to share a bed. Yet here alternate sleeping habits came about from their different requirements. It's how Ariel began wondering if separation was the outcome of excess. If someone had money, they could afford space. The less anyone relied on others, the more distance they could afford. Back in England, most could afford a bed of their own and their family members, while here less than 0.5% of the population could, so sharing beds became the norm. Amongst the small folk, a whole family could share one large bed, since it was simply a cost, heat and space-efficient solution. Those who slept alone were usually only the richest among the rich, and they often preferred communal sleeping too. At Dragonstone, Bela and Rhaena shared a bed. Joffrey and Visenya did as well. Aegon and Helena shared when they were younger, while Jace and Luke had only recently been given private chambers of their own, though after winter started they'd been known to migrate back into the same bed whenever Dragonstone wasn't warm enough. But even unrelated bedmates were often put together too. Sometimes it was for such reasons the Queen stated, for warmth in insufficiently insulated castles during winter. But sometimes because there were too many strangers visiting the castle and they put all the children together to guard one room properly. Then there were the times it was to prevent any untoward behavior. Sneaking someone in or getting out themselves became far more difficult when there was already a third party in the bed. "If you don't want a maid, I don't mind assisting with your hair," Helena offered, and though Ariel wanted to wave her off, she wasn't so tired as to have forgotten their location. This was the Red Keep. Tomorrow was a new day, and after a little show earlier, it wasn't the worst idea to keep presentable. "Yes, please," Ariel agreed, and turned around so Helena could get access. Though Helena was more used to being tended to herself, she had Ariel's hair neatly bound for the night within minutes. Her limbs felt like lead, her mind sluggish, and though Ariel kept some of her irritation with Helena, the princess was a difficult girl to stay angry at, especially when she was so genuinely happy to have Ariel there. After the last day, after the events of the last weeks, more than anything Ariel just wanted a friend. Uncomplicated and easy. And though there were things left unsaid, Helena was doing exactly that. The charms on her gown hadn't worn out yet, so even after Ariel blew out all the candles, it acted as a night lamp for where it had been left hanging. "It's so beautiful, like fireflies." Helena admired the dress while Ariel raised her wand, muttering, "Finite." The lamp turned off, leaving only the fireplace to light the room. "Oh no!" Helena exclaimed, whirling around. "What did you do?" "It's fine. I can put the magic back in the gown whenever I wish it," Ariel murmured sleepily. "That's peculiar." Helena trailed off awkwardly, wringing her hands. "Is it magic from a spellbook? Did Rubius perhaps mention he had another book to you?" Ariel blinked. "What?" "No. I mean, yeah, he's got several books." She gestured to the bed. Which side of the bed do you prefer, Helena? The one towards the window. Ariel nodded as she climbed onto the opposite side of the bed and pulled the thick woolen hangings shut. The feather mattress and woolly blankets were cold from a day of disuse, while Helena closed the blinds on her side, before getting in too. With the blinds shut, it became pitch black, but hardly cramped for space. Ariel? In deference to the darkness and enclosed space, Helena's voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. I understand you are worn out, but it also seems as if... Did I do something? No, Ariel said. You did nothing. And then added in her head, that's the problem. Was it something that happened on your journey then, which toils at you? Several memories flashed before her heart clenching as she thought of her torn winter rose. Eyes stinging, Ariel rolled away, pressing her face into the pillow. You can tell me. No, she couldn't. I'm just so tired, Helena. Alicent. Why is the Lady Ariel cross with you, Aemond? Alicent demanded of her son. She summoned all three of her sons to break their fast together in her rooms on behest of her father, while Helena was occupied with Lady Ariel. Her father Otto had wanted this conversation last eve, but Alicent had put her foot down so Aemond could rest and recover from his long travels, though they couldn't dally further. The Red Keep was filled with nobles. Lord Boris Baratheon's family was a handful, and their bickering with the Lannisters had kept Alicent quite busy as is. Now that Rubius Hagrid showed up riding Vhagar, while Lady Ariel arrived flying onto the balcony and trailing gold down the corridor, she doubted it'd be much quieter. Her son Aemond had flown to the wall and back for that girl. By all means, such gallantry should have been the inspiration for a new tune or two by the court bard. Yet whatever transpired had brought back little but northern chills between them. You had good relations in the past, so how did this come about? Perchance because she was forced to spend any substantial time with the twat? Aegon murmured. How pathetic is that? Have I taught you nothing? Days traveling together, with every opportunity to be the knight to her rescue. All you had to do was smile, you wooden little dweeb, and it wouldn't be a problem. Maybe if you'd been a man and just... Aegon, not now! Alicent turned and slapped Aegon's shoulder, too furious with him to have any patience that morn. In his folly, Aegon had deflowered a serving girl of House Baratheon. Of all his options, why a girl who'd ran straight back to the Lady of Storm's End to spill everything? The only thing saving Alicent's shame was the fact Aegon wasn't married, but at this point she feared nothing would stop his lustful ways. What sort of alliance could they build if Aegon didn't stop his hoarding after marriage? You've done enough. Eat your meal and you can speak your drivel later. This is about your brother. In that regard, Alicent didn't know what to make of Lady Ariel. In the past, she'd done most of her observations from a spell-safe distance. Lady Ariel was very foreign, her magic unnerving. But she'd saved Aemond's life from dragonfire, and for that Alicent had tried to think kinder of her. Yet when she wore gowns like the creation of last eve, it became difficult to ignore how different she was. She could fly. She was an unburned who talked to dragons and bent the world to her whims. Where did the faith cover the likes of her? Was she blessed by the Seven or something else? Despite her unfortunate black hair and haunting green eyes, Lady Ariel was beginning to be regarded as more Valyrian than the Targaryens for the things she could do. Why is Lady Ariel resentful of her rescuer? Her father asked. Next to Alicent, her youngest Daeron nibbled at his meal quietly, glancing avidly between everyone while Aemond shifted under his grandfather's stare. Daeron's presence was a balm to Alicent's soul. Her gentle youngest, well-tempered, dutiful, and carrying next to no strangeness in his mind. Not too lustful, too obstinate, or too distracted. Despite bonding to a beautiful she-dragon with fire as strange as Norbert, Daeron remained more interested in knighthood, his studies, and upholding the faith. Alicent loved all of her children, But it would be hard once her cousin Ormond took Daeron back to Old Town to yet again be left the only sensible person in the family. It's Rhaenyra's fault, Aemond murmured. She's been leading Hariel and Rubius astray. How so? Her father asked. They're displeased with the execution of the alliance agreement, as Rhaenyra failed to clarify some of the stipulations. Such as? Otto pressed. Aemond sighed. Hariel was not aware she'd be marrying into House Targaryen. How could she possibly be unaware of that? Alicent asked, sipping her water. And even if they were unaware, why would it cause an argument? Otto asked. There is no greater honor than marrying into House Targaryen, particularly a foreigner. They took offense to the lack of clarifications, and was comparing our methods to what the Prince of Pentos did, which was, on parchment, perhaps a more beneficial proposal than anything House Targaryen has provided. Prince Reggio offered immense farms and lands in exchange for Hariel's hand, whilst we have given Rubius a dwelling? Aemon said uncomfortably. Daeron's brows climbed up his forehead, while Aegon smirked. That and how the crown has never said outright our alliance was a marriage pact. They took our ambiguity to mean the alliance was but a plain transaction of favors. Boarding, protection and shelter for Rubius' services, which until the Vhagar incident was quite beneficial to us. Hariel concluded this failure to inform them was either because we don't value them as allies enough to speak plainly, or because we somehow exploited their foreign upbringings and meant to keep them ignorant. She found neither option very flattering. If their discontent is as you say, then the situation is more dire than we knew of, Otto said quietly. A lost girl's whereabouts was never worth the realm's safety. The king should have demanded Lady Hariel be betrothed for Rubius Hagrid's pardon. That could have worked, but in your rush to see matters settled, my father has already granted Rubius a royal pardon, Aemon said, picking up his goblet. With new information brought to light, you think it was accidental? Aemon asked sharply, gesturing towards the window. You think Hariel was flying for spectators and dressing in golden gowns in the north? You think it wasn't deliberate to push for a swift resolution? Then why did you let her? Let her? Let her? I'd like to see you try. Hariel can blow doors ajar with her hand. I've been... Aemon tugged agitated at the ends of his hair. Did she try to harm you with her magic? Alicent asked sharply, making Aegon snorts, Daeron become bewildered and Aemon tense. No, Aemon said firmly. But Norbert is notably faster than Vermivor and Vhagar. If Rubius hadn't remained at my side, I could almost have assumed she'd ran away again. Again? Aegon asked, picking up his beverage with an impish grin. How many times did you send her fleeing from your company, Aemon? Aemon pursed his lips, eyes narrowing dangerously. It was left to me to tell her how close she'd been to suffer Daemon for husband, wasn't it? Aegon coughed on his cider. Well, Otto said, I can't falter there. Wish to know who else she named unacceptable, Aemon said, voice going smooth and quiet the way it only did when he was about to spread spite. Could it be his name is an anagram of our uncle's? Aegon snapped. I'm astonished you know what an anagram is. Have you been made to attend Daeron's lessons again? Daeron frowned, and Alicent quickly reached to put a consoling hand on her younger's shoulder before cutting the other two off. They were getting off topic. Going back on the pardon now will only strain the situation further, father. Aemon looked slowly away from Aegon. Even if the king had demanded a betrothal, do you expect it would have resolved the issue? He asked. As if he played them for fools for years and then blackmailed once the ploy was discovered. Blackmail? What nonsense! Otto laughed. Marriage is the only option where everyone gets everything they want. You believe so? Aemon challenged. Would you still state the same if Sir Laenor had put forth Luke as a match last eve? Or Daemon? Why not let them take her? Aegon asked. Dragonstone is where they've been for years, and would it be so bad if they remained there? It wasn't before they left that trouble started, and in my opinion this is far too much hassle to secure an alliance with 2 people. Aegon held up a couple fingers to demonstrate the pitiful number. From a certain angle, Alicent couldn't help but agree with her eldest. There were a lot of uncomfortable matters being evaluated, added with several uncertain gambles. And for what? That's what Alicent had felt before Vhagar. Now it was different. They're 2 travelers from some island they can't even navigate back to. Why are we bothering with pampering to their sensibilities? I say just distract Rubius for a day in the pit while we put Hariel in the chapel and get it over with. What are you going to do then? I don't see why we can't have this resolved before sunset. Aemond looked at Aegon as if he was dirt under his shoe. You know even without magic Rubius can bend swords with his bare fists, don't you? He can? Theron breathed in wonder, but went ignored. And how do you propose we put Hariel anywhere? Aemond asked dryly. She'd fly out of the window before anyone could escort her anywhere. Even if we somehow did manage to manhandle her to the wedding, the bride might be so furious by the disrespect she'd set the sept on fire in the middle of the ceremony. That'd be treason, Aegon said with a laugh, finding the entire scenario ludicrous. And she's magic, Aemond responded. They needs be willing, brother. A good way to prevent them from being so is disrespecting and manhandling them. Or are such concepts beyond your understanding? The blasphemy of imagining a burning sept sent goosebumps down Alicent's spine, but simultaneously Aemond's phrasing made her think there was more here. If she's been under this misapprehension for years, does that mean Lady Hariel's looking elsewhere for marriage? Alicent asked, starting to put the pieces together. From Lady Hariel's coldness to Aemond's sour attitude. Did she have her heart set on someone else? Her father looked skywards as if for patience. All this over a silly girl's foolish woes. Spare me the idiocy. Stop it, Aemond snapped. She's not... They did have grounds to be offended. If it wasn't for the council's urging, father would have rewarded Rubius years ago. But even without it, they are powerful. Rubius needs no lordship or knighthood to be acknowledged as such. Lady Hariel alone, unmarried as she is, can make anything she lacks for with the tip of her hand. She can make sheets of fabric into glowing gold. For blood is more valuable than gold and lands and farms and servants. When you have the means to do all that with no aid, what can we even offer? Aemond trailed off, dragging a hand through his hair. Rubius gave up his rights to the world's most dangerous dragon for a girl not even his own kin. Should that not tell you something? They themselves are more like dragons than men. And what do dragons care for? They care for magic and blood and answer to those who's earned their respect. A smart move would have been respecting them enough to clarify the terms of a damn marriage pact, as we do with everyone else. So how come we failed here? Where do we stand then? Alicent asked when no one could give Aemond the answer he wanted, which was any at all. After everything. Firstly, it seems we must impress upon Rubius this is Rhaenyra's failing, her father suggested. Though they are slighted by the continued failing at Rhaenyra, Ser Lenor and Daemon's End, they have friends on Dragonstone and still believe the king owed them the facts of their alliance before it was struck back at Driftmark. Aemond pointed out stiffly, studying the content of his goblet. Her father nodded. They're aware his grace has been ill for many years. An oversight by the king was expected to be corrected by his heir Rhaenyra. That excuse doesn't speak well of the forethought we put into the alliance, Alicent said. As if we were careless with what we bargained. Were we? Aemond asked, and the silence he received was once again telling. Glancing towards her father, Alicent wondered the same. As hand, he'd been involved every step of the bargain, and Alicent could see how blame might fall on his feet as well as Rhaenyra here. If the king was too ill, As the steward of the king's will and wisdom, it would have been his duty to rectify the oversight. If it was an oversight, Alicent doubted it. Rubius's graceless bumbling during the trial had been pitiful. It would have been laughable if it wasn't for his full pardon. Yet even though Rubius lacked adequate etiquette, Alicent doubted Lady Harriel was unaware of the chain of command, and she'd made her standpoint perfectly clear. Was it the magic that made them so steadfast in one another's support? Was it shared experiences? Her father reached over and stopped her hands from fidgeting. She'd been poking at her nails again. "You rectified the situation, Aemond," Otto said, nodding approvingly at her son. "You brought the matter to light, did you not? Which disproves their claim of being misled, at least by us." Aemond frowned, looking conflicted towards the pale light streaming through the window panels. "Oh, what did you do, Aemond?" Alicent asked, because if he wasn't happy for this path as a solution, it was because he'd already started burning the bridge. Had I been aware of the circumstances, I could have, but I didn't, and my phrasing may not have been as delicate as Lady Harriel deserved," Aemond muttered. "Gods, Aemond. Oh, Aemond." Her son had lost his temper again. "What did you say?" Alicent asked, "so we may gloss it over." "It's..." Aemond shook his head. "It's irrelevant." Aemond excelled in so many ways, until his temper was unleashed. The Targaryen fire burned far too hot in her second son. At times it made him near unmanageable. Alicent had never been able to quench those traits in him. For years she'd feared Aemond would meet his end within those jaws of the beast he kept sneaking out to sea. Too willful and obstinate, and then after the events on Driftmark and Dragonstone it had gotten far harder. All three of Aemond's siblings were better at keeping their tongues between their teeth, and normally she'd sent him to the practice yards when he became too much. Aegon could be handled with some wine, Helena was easily distracted with insects, Daeron entertained with tales of knights, but her second son, obstinate, thy name is Aemond. Yet the more she strived to rile him in, the more he sought to do the opposite. If irrelevance and toil are the only affections you're left with from your relations, then I'd be remiss not to consider so readily available alternatives when they are at hand. Perhaps it's in everyone's best interest if we suggest Daeron for the marriage pact," Alicent said, leaning back in her chair and awaiting the reactions. "Me?" Daeron exclaimed. "Him?" Aemond spat. "Ha!" Aegon laughed. Aemond jerked to his feet, eyes flaring. "That's absurd! They've hardly met, mother, and Daeron will be returning to Old Town for his fostering. You always said... You think Daeron would manage the situation better? Manage Harriel and her magic? She's not a fucking tourney! Hey!" "Don't push it, Daeron, for anger's about to blow," Aegon muttered. "Can you manage them?" Alicent countered Aemond. "Of course I can," he answered angrily. "Certainly better than Daeron can." "Excuse me, but I can handle..." "Don't you have a breastplate to scrub for cousin Ormond like the good little squire boy you are?" Aemond snarled at his younger brother. "Boys," Otto said sternly, "I'll be meeting with Rubius at noon over tea. I don't have time for your squabbling." "Will you do your duty when we push for a match with Lady Harriel?" Alicent said, glancing from Aemond to her father. "I will! I assumed that was the intention the entire time," he answered, cheeks red. It was, but it had never been made official. Aemond glanced at his grandfather. "Keep in mind Rubius is more Dragon Keeper than Lord. Speak with him as if he's a knight instead of a politician, and don't try to poke at the age stipulation. It's not negotiable." "I'm aware," Otto said thoughtfully, while Alicent felt a head pain building. Though at least she had this much confirmed. Someone had to secure the foreigners to their side. Aemond wanted to marry Lady Harriel, and that was more than most got. A mother could be happy for that, even if she wished Aemond wasn't drawn to the exotic and unnatural. It was better than forcing such on him unwilling. The tone regarding Lady Harriel and Rubius sounded quite different around the Red Keep compared to her private chambers. Rubius's acquisition of Vega had spread like wildfire, but Lady Harriel's golden appearance was almost discussed more. A pretty gown should have been insignificant in comparison to a dragon, but even Alicent had been left staring. Lady Harriel had looked otherworldly, as if time had bent and brought forth a lost piece of old Valyria to parade down the halls of the Red Keep. And that could be Alicent's own legacy one day too. Her grandchildren, radiant in gold by wish, untouchable, unburnable, and safe from those who sought to harm and usurp them. Unless it became Rhaenyra's legacy instead. With so many nobles at court, it was Alicent's duty as queen to see to their comforts and entertainments. The lady's tea was arranged before yesterday's petition was ever on anyone's mind, and there had been several before it, but this time a watchful atmosphere hovered through the room. There was a dragon-riding witch in attendance. At a first glance, Alicent believed Lady Harriel had forgone magic. Perhaps last evening's gown was done especially for Rubius Hagrid's petition, since initially it seemed like her new attire behaved just as noble fabric should. A neatly foam-curving gown in grey with bright threaded embroidery. Nothing remarkable, until Alicent noticed the countless white snowflakes across the dress were actually falling, like calmly falling snow. Beautiful, elegant, and indisputably magical. Compared to the sparkling stars and flowing gold of the night before, this was extremely subtle, yet once Alicent noticed it was impossible not to see it. An urge she hadn't felt since she was 4 and 10 and still unassertive in her role as queen made Alicent straighten her skirts, draping it properly over her legs to display the gems in graceful leaf patterns. A quick glance around the room revealed Alicent wasn't the only one to straighten their posture or brush down their gowns either. "How's your day been? Did you take Lady Harriel to do something fun, or is she still recuperating after her travels?" Alicent asked, smiling warmly to Lady Harriel so she'd know the remark was only out of concern. "We went to see Rubius and the book of their homeland," Helena said, as bright-eyed as Alicent had ever seen her daughter. A book? Alicent would have hoped they had engaged in something more entertaining for two young maidens to spend their time on. Something inclusive and interesting to make Lady Harriel more at ease after the tense welcome of the day before. "The book is written in their tongue, but Harriel offered to read it to me." "A book of their homeland," Alicent said. "I'd wish to hear it too, Lady Harriel." Harriel had expected that. "I'd be honored, Your Grace, though I should warn you as I did your daughter. I'll be slow to read, because there are words in that book with no direct translation. Also, the book might not be the best for entertainment. It's a text written to instruct, not storytelling." "That may be, but then I'm curious to learn," Alicent insisted good-humoredly before they went to sit down. For the tea, Helena was seated with her favorite ladies-in-waiting, Jacqueline Redwine on her left and Lady Harriel on the other, similar to how Alicent had her own favorites at her side, the unspoken placements signaling which lady were held in favor, though she didn't miss how Harriel had barely acknowledged Lady Bela on the way in, solidifying the rumors of their disagreement. As uncomfortable as the idea sometimes made her, Alicent had accepted Lady Harriel would likely be her future good daughter. She'd acclimated to the dragons, so Alicent was sure she could manage the magic too, though there were others besides Harriel present who would likely join her family as well. Looking over the ladies, Alicent wondered if there might be such a thing as too many options. This would have been far more manageable if handled by Raven. Instead, the affair had been dragged out far longer than it should have after all her eligible sons and only daughter abandoned the castle in favor of searching the kingdoms for lost maidens, leaving the vultures swarming for any available piece of juicy gossip. The Lady of Storm's End, Elenda Baratheon, had brought her daughters, the four Storms, Cassandra, Maris, Eileen, and Florus, who were seated together, all of them dark of hair with blue eyes. Though Lady Cassandra was the oldest at 4 and 10 and fairest, Alicent could tell Eileen Baratheon had the potential to grow just as comely, but at 10 years old she was too young for Aegon. Yet that didn't stop Lady Elenda from pushing Eileen towards Daeron at every opportunity. The Lady of Castle Rock, Johanna Westerling, had brought her two oldest daughters, Tishara and Cerelle Lannister. She had left another couple girls behind at Castle Rock as they were toddlers, but the woman had taken the trip despite growing round with her 5th child. Alicent had promised to keep Johanna in her prayers in hopes the woman could at last give her husband an heir after 4 unsuccessful attempts, while Johanna prayed not so quietly for her eldest daughter to make a match that could show the crown the value of the Westerlands. Since Lady Baela Targaryen had arrived without any female companionship at court, she sat with Grace Wild, whom she'd quickly struck up an amicable friendship with. Grace was one of the Master of Laws, Jasper Wild's 18 living children, though he'd had 27 offspring in total, while his 4th wife was pregnant with number 28. Alicent might have been remiss to pray for Hale's sons for Lord Jasper. His line was secure as is, and perchance if he'd heeded the Maester's counsel and allowed his wife some rest between children, it had gone better for the previous 3, the last 2 whom Alicent had grieved personally. Still, for a collection of ladies who hadn't missed a single opportunity to snide at one another all moon, they were abruptly acting united in their curiosity, eyeing and judging this new addition to court. Yet Lady Hariel wasn't making it easy. The eve before she'd arrived flying, bold as a dragon in her defense of Rubius. Today she was quiet, observant, and her mannerisms diminished. If it wasn't for the dress, she'd have blended away with the crowd, as seemed to be her wish if given a choice. Aemond was relieved to return home, Alicent said an hour later, trying once again to coax the girl into more than vague deflections. You were stuck in the north even longer. It must be a relief to sleep without fear of freezing. Ariel's practiced smile fell slightly. It's true the north has far harder winters. The bit of dusted snow here is not but a sludge to the mountainous piles of ice and snow by the wall. Yet Winterfell is a grand but comfortably warm castle, my queen. Is that so? Alicent said, noting Hariel was finally coming out of her quiet contemplations, so she pushed a little further. You're the only one present who has journeyed so far north. You must share your experiences of your travels, Lady Hariel. Aemond already shared some insights into Lord Kragan's succession ceremony, but then you flew together to see the wall as well. Oh, just like King Jaehaerys and Queen Elisane did together, the Shara Lannister said, giggling as he side-eyed Hariel. The innocent teasing insinuating there was something between Lady Hariel and Aemond got Alicent's attention, since why would the Shara Lannister make light of that? Did that mean it only took a fortnight's absence before her attention drifted? Was it Aegon the Shara hoped for a betrothal with? Was it Daeron? Or was it Jaehaerys Valarion's arrival that had made the Lannister reconsider, despite seeing as plain bastardy for themselves? They needed look no further than her sons to know what a true Targaryen prince was supposed to look like. The gods did not make mistakes. Alicent wasn't Valyrian herself, but despite her own dark hair, all 4 of her true-born children were blessed indisputably Valyrian. Because she'd been faithful, dutiful, prayed, and the gods had heard them. While Rhaenyra's sins were displayed bare for all to see in the dark hair and eyes of her illegitimate sons. It was only the combination of Harwin's death and Sir Leno's abrupt rise in status as an unborn that had made Rhaenyra see reason, and she finally laid her selfish pleasures aside long enough to produce a true-born child. Yet the gods hadn't forgotten her sins, because Princess Visenya Velaryon was only a girl. Alicent was brought out of her thoughts by Helena's lady-in-waiting, who didn't look pleased with Helena's new lady. I'm not sure that's comparable. Were you not accompanied by Rubius Hagrid too? Jacqueline Redwine asked shortly, her tone too sharp. Helena glanced at her friend uncertainly. Jacqueline was a sweet girl from a high-born family, and Alicent couldn't fault her for being smitten with Aemond. That did not mean Alicent approved of her tone though. Jacqueline's duty as a lady-in-waiting was to assist her princess, not alienate Lady Hariel when she was already made cautious by Rubius' petition and circumstances. He was there as well. We all saw the wall. It's a construction of wonder. Hariel nodded agreeable to Jacqueline, showing no sign she'd caught the hostile tone. My son is a true prince, Alicent said. But regardless, it wouldn't be proper for a maiden to travel without an escort. On the topic of the north, if I may be so bold, is your gown a creation of your travels, Lady Hariel? Lady Elenda Baratheon asked softly. It's as if you captured a piece of the northern winter in it. Lady Hariel brushed down her gown self-consciously, looking startlingly like the maid of 5 and 10 she supposedly was. Thank you, Lady Elenda. Though the winter season is treacherous, bitter and cold, it can be beautiful too. I used to think the grey and white colors of House Stark plain, but you've made me reconsider, Hariel, Helena said, picking up her tea. Alicent only then realized she was right. The magic of it all aside, those were star colors, weren't they? How do you make your gowns, Lady Hariel? Lady Cassandra asked, eyes on the snow pattern. Judging by how many of the ladies leaned forward, she spoke for the crowd. Is it a magical dye? Enchanted thread? Lady Hale's expression changed, and for a split second she reminded Alicent suddenly of Rhaenyra. They looked nothing alike, and yet in that moment Alicent knew the girl had nothing but scorn on her tongue, and it wouldn't take much to unleash it. Unlike the princess though, Hariel took a deep breath before answering. Not quite. It's a practiced spell, Lady Hariel answered simply. Practice? Cassandra said, confused. Magic must be studied and practiced repeatedly until you reach a mastery of the spell. If you don't learn, you don't know. Like reading. But I've never had to learn to read, Cassandra said. Ariel blinked. You haven't learned to read yet? Dear me, no. I have enough with my studies to add on something so useless, Cassandra said with a tinkering laugh. What do anyone but the maesters need such for? I'm a daughter of House Baratheon. Judging by Hariel's expression, that was precisely why Cassandra should know. There was an almost visible divide in the room between those who thought Hariel strange for questioning the illiteracy, and a handful who deemed Cassandra lucky instead. Baela Targaryen smirked patronizingly at Cassandra, but Lady Abby Tully seemed to be of a similar mind as the Baratheons. Because why would a lady of such high birth waste time on letters when someone would always be available to read out loud? While Tashara Lancer jutted her chin up, looking ready to mention at the drop of a hat that she'd certainly mastered her letters. Cassandra is an excellent singer and talented with the harp, Lady Elenda said quickly, having sensed the judgment from Hariel and several other ladies just as Alicent had. Perchance you'll get to hear her perform and you'll see for yourself. I'm sure you're excellent, Lady Cassandra, Lady Hariel said softly. Personally, I'm not gifted with any instrument. Septa Mega spent countless hours in faithful dedication to see me improve, but with little to show for it. Now she deems me acceptable as long as I can ring the bells on cue without ruining the hard effort of everyone else. To Alicent's surprise, at this unapologetic admission of a failure in a courtly art, and one so basic too, the tension broke. Jacqueline's laugh sounded too sharp, but otherwise Lady Elenda smiled amused. Her daughter Cassandra covered a smile behind her hand. The Lannister girl started giggling, and even Baela's lips twitched before she looked away. What could easily have ended in insults over courtly failings was turned into something humorous to be shared instead. Alicent felt it too. It was almost a relief to hear there were things magic couldn't solve for her. Which was illogical, as Alicent already knew there were areas their sorcery couldn't aid them, or their struggles with language would never have become an issue. I hope I'll get the chance to hear you sing, Lady Cassandra, Ariel said, and Alicent jumped on the opening. That's a fine suggestion. Why don't you share a song with us, Lady Cassandra? She suggested. Something of the Stormlands. Oh, I'd be honored, my queen, Cassandra said, flushed with pleasure. As Cassandra stood up and Lady Elenda gestured for a servant to go fetch a harp for her daughter, Alicent was approached by her personal maid Talia. Your Grace, Caraxes was just seen flying above the city, Talia informed quietly. Alicent sighed. So Prince Daemon will be gracing us with his presence soon. And for the second time within the same moon, at that.